today we're going to carry on. And the idea with interest is what? Anytime you borrow money from somebody in the real world, when you pay them back, you have to pay them back more. You have to pay them back more money than you took. And we call that little bit of extra money you give somebody what? Interest. Okay. Now, maybe if you borrow money from your parents, they don't charge you interest. Maybe they do. I don't know. I'd like to think my parents wouldn't have charged me interest. I don't know if I ever borrowed money from my parents. My parents are like, they're very like, when I was 13, they sat me down and had to talk. It was like, you're about to turn 14, so get a job, because we're not buying you things anymore. And like, they meant it. So hard. Yeah, no, my parents are great. Like, they're the nicest people. They do anything for you, but they are like hardworking types. And so they believe their kids had to be like hardworking types. So yeah, they cut me right off. But if we borrow money, we have to pay interest when we pay it back. So if I borrow $100, if it's 5% interest, when I pay it back, I have to pay $5 extra. So I pay the $100 I owe, and I pay the $5 interest, and that's $105, right? So we said that the only thing we have to kind of keep in mind when we do this is that when we talk about percentages, percent, I mean, if you speak French, per means out of, and cent means, what's cent mean? En français, mes amis, cent. It's a number. 100, good. So percent just means out of 100. So anytime I give you a percent, you have to remember, before you start doing math with that number, you have to take that number and divide it by 100. Good. See, this is why I'm back here, because that would have been so quiet from up there, I wouldn't have even heard it. Yeah, any percentage we're given, we divide it by 100. Come on. Yeah. Okay. Oh, 1 sec. Oh. Orlando, I can't believe you're not letting me listen to music while you talk. Oh. Okay, now I feel like we're in this together. We're both mad at Orlando because he won't let us listen to music. I would love to be listening to music right now. I gotta teach. It's my job. That's what I get paid to do. And you don't get paid to learn. So there you go.
Thanks.
Sorry. I wish you did. I wish at the end of the week they gave you all a paycheck, but they don't. But they do give me one. So I gotta do my job. Hey, get that out of there. All right. So with that in mind, we said we have this formula, and it's easy. We just take, if we want to know how much interest we're gonna have to pay with simple interest, we take the money we borrowed, we multiply it by the rate, then we also have to multiply it by time, right? If you only get charged interest once, then that's easy. But if you take 10 years to pay it back, then how many times are you going to get charged interest? 10 times. And so that's what this formula says. Take the money you borrowed, multiply it by the interest rate, multiply it by how many times that happens. That's straightforward, right? And so we said, all you have to do is take that formula and use it. So here we borrowed $1,500 at 6.8% interest. I remembered to divide that by 100, so it's a decimal, so I can actually do math with it. And you just do that in your calculator. If the decimal trick works for you, you can just move the decimal a couple places. I, to be honest, every time just divide it by 100 in my calculator because I have a habit of screwing it up. So if I do it on my calculator, I don't screw it up. So that's how I do it. And then we just plug it into the formula. $1,500 times that percentage times 0.068. And then because it was 10 years, times 10, right? And then we said we can actually rearrange this thing, where maybe we don't want to find the interest. Maybe we want to find how much money we started with. There's a rearrangement for that. Can I tell you guys, you're never going to have to come up with these formulas. Does that make sense? On any test, on any quiz, on anything, I will give you all 4 of these. I don't care. I don't think the purpose of this course is knowing how to rearrange formulas. So I'm not going to make you. You will have both of them. Does that make sense? Or not both. You'll have all 4 of them. Does that make sense? But you just need to know, if it asks how long, which one of these are we going to have to use? Yeah, we're going to have to use the one that finds time. If it says, how much money did you start with? Which one do we use? Which one of these would solve for how much money we started with? Anyone know? I mean, I is interest, so it can't be that. R is the interest rate. T is the time. So the only letter left is P. What's P stand for, by the way? Does anyone know? Principal. Yeah, principal is just the money we start with. So we have these 4 equations. And again, today we're going to do this, and then tomorrow we're going to start a project that's going to see us through Monday and Tuesday, where you're going to start researching about buying a car and applying some of this stuff. There's just one problem, and that leads to today's lesson, which is simple interest, which is what this formula is actually a pretty rare thing. It's not usually how interest works. How interest actually works in the real world is a little bit more complicated to think about, so the math's just as easy. Just as easy to math. So let's take a look. No problem. There you go. There you go. So today we're going to learn about the kind of interest that we actually use in the real world. And once we've done this lesson, then we can get going on this project. We'll actually understand how interest is really calculated. By the way, if any of this stresses you out, don't worry, you're going to get lots of practice. All right? Lots and lots and lots of practice. So if you feel like, oh my God, you showed me this one day, then the next day we're moving on to something new, I wasn't even caught up, you will have lots of time to practice. But today, compound interest. So, yesterday we learned about simple interest, and the thing about simple interest is we don't actually use it very often. And the reason why can be really good news for you. In fact, as we do this, you're going to see that compound interest, the way interest really works in the real world, if you're saving money, is your friend. We like it. On the other hand, if you like turn 16, get your first credit card, or 18, I don't know how old you have to be to get a credit card. 18? If you turn 18, get your first credit card and go like rack the thing up, you're going to see from this why compound interest is not your friend. Compound interest is very much your friend when you're borrowing money. Nope. Compound interest is very much your friend when you're lending money, when you're saving, right? Remember we said all saving is, I hear something. Ah. You don't still want to eat this, do you? Sorry? Okay. Whose is this? You don't still want to eat this, do you? No, you're good, I can throw it out? It's like, if you really want it, I'll give it to you, but... Okay. Okay, so there we go. So first I want to look at just if this were simple interest. And we said simple interest is easy, right? We're going to start with $100. Nice, easy number. And we're going to take what percentage of that? 10%. Now we said anytime we get a percentage, what do we have to do with that number before we can work with it? Turn it into a decimal. So this is the interest rate. What little letter do we use to remember the interest rate? Then remember, what letter did we use for interest rate? R. Good. So we'll say R. And I have to take this number, 10%, and I have to divide it by 100, right? So do that for me. Tell me what number I'm working with here. You want one of these? It's a little bit nicer. Does anyone else need a calculator? Coming over. All right. So 10% is a decimal. What do we got? What is it? No, it's not that. Try again. Did you put that in there?
No.
No, that's okay. It's kind of cute. I thought you did. Nice. I like it. All right, so show me. Don't you love that I can walk around while doing this now? Isn't that great for you?
No.
It's great for me too. That's what we got. Very nice. Good. So hopefully everybody gets 0.1. Yeah? Is that what everyone got? Did anyone get anything different? Okay, cool. So now, I want you to imagine we start with that $100. With simple interest, how do we calculate the interest rate? Well, we said the interest is just what? It's the money we started with, right? It's I equals PRT. P is the money we started with. How much money is that? $100. We have to multiply it by the rate, which was what? 0.10. And time, we're doing this just for a year, right? So we can just say 1 there and do that on your calculator. See how much money you're going to get in interest in that first year. What do we get? $10. Now with simple interest, the nice thing is we never have to do this math again, because how much money in interest will we get every year then now? With simple interest. It's just that 10% over and over again, right? So every year with simple interest, we're just going to make $10 in interest. That's 10% of our original amount. So go ahead and take a minute and figure out what you'd have by the end of year 8. I'll do the first one with you. We started out with $100. We made $10. Now how much money do I have? $110. Now at the beginning of the next year, that's how much money I have. But I make 10 more, so now I'm going to have $120. Good. So keep going all the way to the end. Excellent. Very good. And you know what? You don't even have to do the calculation. Oh, yeah, you're good. Right? Like, because we know what the interest is, it's just the same every year. Yeah, you could use the formula, but... Yeah. Way, kid. All right. So at the end of, how many years is this? 8 years. At the end of 8 years, how much mad cash have I made? Yeah. Now, how much have I actually made? 80. How much do I have total? 180. Good. And we can show that. Buttons are in different places on this one. There we go. Good. Does that match what you had? And I want you to see that you could have predicted this with the formula, right? Because we said that interest is equal to PRT. So if you'd wanted to, instead of filling out this table, what could I have put here to figure out how much money I'd have after 3 years? But to use this formula here, what could I have put in? Interest equals what? How much money did we start with? $100. What's the rate again? 10%, but what was it where I can do math with it? Yep, 0.1. And here, if we're talking about the third year, how many years would that be? Or what would the T value? Thank you for rescuing me from that attempted sentence. Yeah, if we're talking about the third year, then we'd put 3 in for time. Do that on your calculator. See what you get. And then when you've done that, go ahead and do it for 6 years and see if it matches what you had in the table. Yep. Yeah, when you put numbers next to each other, in math, it always means multiplication. So if we don't show a sign, the default operation in math is multiplication. which is weird because it's not the one we learn first, right? But it's the default. I feel like I should sit next to you and watch YouTube videos with you so you don't feel lonely. What do you get when you do this? Nice. So what do we get when we do this? 30. Does that make sense? Yeah, so total money would be what? What would our total money be if the interest was 30? Right? How do you always find your total? Because don't forget, you don't lose the money you started with, right? So I started with how much money? $100. And I made how much money? 30. So at the end of 3 years, I'd have $130. I can do it with a table. I can do it with the formula. We get the same answer. This is pretty common sense, yeah? All right. So go ahead and do it for 6 years as well. And you should see that this makes perfect sense. Nice. Yeah, very good. Very good. So, I haven't been over there yet, but I'm going to bet that, what do you have? What's your final answer there? Yeah, perfect. So just like last time, yeah. I haven't seen any.
Oh.
Take whatever you see. If you find one, it's yours. I think there's one under here too, actually. And I feel like, have you checked with Calford?
No.
I feel like Calford has a box of them. Okay. But I think those are the only two I have. Oh, there's one more down there, actually.
We only need two.
Oh, this is enough for you. It's all yours.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Now, can anyone think how I could game this system to make more money? Who here is conniving? Because to my mind, compound interest just comes from being clever and saying, wait a minute, I bet I could make more money. Let me tell you what I think. How much you think of this? What if at the end of that first year, I took my money out? So instead of leaving my money in for 8 years, I take my money out. How much money do I have now? I have 110. What if I leave the bank with my $110, I go outside, turn around, I walk back in the bank, and I say, hey, I've got $110. I'd like to invest it. Am I smart? See, this year, how much interest will I get? What am I going to get? I'm going to get 10% again. But now I'm not getting 10% of $100. I'm getting 10% of $110. Now, I don't want to stress you out, but that's an extra $1. A whole extra buck. But listen. I understand that $1 over 2 years isn't a lot of money, but do you see the idea here? And at the end of that year, I'm going to go and say, hey, give me my $221, thank you. I'm going to take my 121. So give me my $121 with my extra buck. I'm going to say, I'm taking it out. I'm going to leave. I'll leave the bank. I'm going to turn around and walk back into the bank. And I'm going to say, I'd like to invest $121, please. And now I'm going to make 10 cents extra. Now, is this a lot of money? No, but it adds up, right? Does this make sense? And this is the idea with compound interest. Compound interest is somebody said, why am I taking the same interest every year when I have more money? Shouldn't I get more interest if I have more money? And if the only thing stopping that from happening is me going to the bank, getting my money, and then going back into the bank, I'm going to do that. And eventually banks just had to say, Yeah, okay. That's a thing. And it's called compound interest. So here's how it works. At first, the math is going to seem a little more complicated. It actually, once you've done a few, they're just as easy and it makes sense. So let's do this. Interest earned this year, we're just going to do 10% times how much money? 10% times my $100. Do that on your calculator. We've already done this one. We know that that gives us how much money? That gives us 10 bucks. So now I've got how much money at the end of the year? 110 bucks. But now, the next year, when I go to get my interest, I'm still taking 10%, but now I'm taking 10% of? Yep, which is? Yep, yeah. So altogether, how much money do I have to put in here? No problem. Now I've got 110 bucks. Do that on your calculator. Yeah, I want to take this cart and just throw it out a window, actually. No, look at it. It's a like, I don't understand the thinking of being like, hey, we're in a classroom. We got a bunch of kids in here. Let's get a really tall cart and put a really tall monitor on top of it. It makes me really angry. I don't know if you noticed this. I get heated about this. It makes me, you know what I don't like? I don't like amateur hour. I think if you're going to go, I don't. If you're going to go to work, like, let's just all do our jobs like we're professionals. This is not professional. This looks like my Christmas tree. Okay, end of rant. Hi, whoever's listening to this recording. Hi, Miss Sargent. I mean every word of it. I assume she listens to all my lessons. Okay, so if I take 10% of 110 bucks, what do I get? Who's done this on the calculator? What do I get? 11 bucks. And now, how much money do I have at the end of that year? Almost. How much? I started with 110. I get 11 more. Very good. Now I've got 121 bucks. And so the next year, I take 10%. But what am I taking 10% of now? 121 bucks. All right. This is the last one I'm going to do with you. And I want you to do the rest. By the way, this is the last time we will ever do this step by step by hand for 8 years, because it gets kind of ugly, right? I'm going to teach you a formula. But what does this work out to? Well, take your time. Work it out. $12.10. And so now I've got what? $133.10. All right, keep going. Take it all the way to the bottom. By the way, you know how many decimal places to keep when you get doing this? Because how many decimal places do we have in money? 2. Good. Right? 2 decimal places for money. 1 decimal place would be the nearest dime. 2 decimal places the nearest penny. And before you say we don't measure things to the nearest penny, yes, we do in our bank accounts. We just can't actually spend them. Crap. 1464, I think. Has anyone gotten this far? Did I screw this up, or is that right? That's what you got? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Oh gosh. Don't blindly copy me, by the way, because I'm doing this in my head, and that can be ugly sometimes. So you trust you. Who, me? No, I'm making a good faith effort here. So if I screw up, it's good old fashioned incompetence. I would do it. Do we get the same?
Aren't we rounding? This is 57.72, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Did I screw up on the last one?
Yeah, you messed up on like the on the interest. Yeah.
Oh, I rounded up because that's a 6. So I rounded up. So we're different by a penny, right? Like, so you had 214.04. Did you have 214.04?
I got 214.34.
Oh yeah, because you're right. That's why that happened. Yeah, I got 3.5. You got 3.4. So I rounded up. You rounded down, and I think I'm right. But that's okay. But yeah, I was wrong about the 0. I just got too lazy to figure out what that number was, I guess. So I just put a 0 there. But what I should have put was a 3. Sorry about that. And you will be 2 pennies above me. You'll be 214.36. Is that true?
Do we have to round
I
up?
don't know.
You should round up. I'm not going to be finicky about pennies here.
I just kept it.
Yeah. We'll do. You know what? Can I ask, would a day on rounding be helpful? Like, but like, do you guys feel really confident? Like, yes, I know how to round well. Okay, then round. Okay, but don't spend it. But you don't want me to spend a day rounding with you? Like, I'm not saying that to be like I'm happy to. When I teach chemistry, we spend a whole day on rounding because they come in and they're terrible at it, and so we spend a day. Okay, now, ready? Here's the deal. Hands up if you think doing that sucked. Ooh, me? Yeah, that's not fun, right? If I wanted to know how much money I had in 8 years, wouldn't it be nice to have a simple formula? Okay, ready? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to learn how to find the future value. And for that, we use FV. I just mentioned this because we're not finding interest here. We're going to find the whole thing. We're going to find not just the interest, but also the money you started with. So remember with the simple interest, how we had to add them together at the end to get the total? You won't have to do that here. This formula finds the total. And let's talk about how this works. In every one of these equations, what did we do? We multiplied something by 0.10. Does everyone see that? We multiplied by 0.10 over and over and over again. So in our equation, we're going to take the money we start with, right? We know that. And what's the letter we use for the money we start with? P. Good. So P, and just remember, that's the money you start with. The proper financial term for that is principal. Or you'll sometimes see present value. These all mean the same thing. It just means how much money you have when you start out. Does that make sense? Most often, I actually use the term present value. And every time we do this, we're going to multiply it. And I'm going to put this in a bracket here. We're going to multiply it by the interest rate. But we're actually going to kill two birds with one stone here. Because we multiply it by the interest rate, and then what did we do to get this last number? What did we always have to do to get the final total answer? We had to add it, and we had to add it to what we started with, right? And in this bracket, we're going to say we start with all of the money we started with. And what's the number that means, like, what do you multiply by to have exactly what you already have? Not more, not less, not nothing, not infinite. What do you multiply something by so that you keep exactly that number? 1. If I multiply 7 by 1, I get 7. If I multiply 12 by 1, I get 12. So we're going to multiply this by 1 and then add it to the interest. And what this really means is we're going to take the money we start with, we're going to keep all of that money, and we're going to get interest. Does that make sense? That's what this bracket is telling you. The 1, let's see if I can sneak this in here, says keep what you start with. And then multiplying by the interest rate means that we also get interest. I want my rainbow pen. I'm going to redo that. That's better. Bless you. I want you guys to know that I understand that you're not as excited as I am about the rainbow pen. I just don't care. It makes me happy. Okay, and then keep in mind, did we just do that one time? Well, we actually did it over and over and over again. Hey, we just spent 3 days on this. How do we show multiplication that happens again and again and again? If I wanted to multiply 3 by itself a bunch of times, say I wanted to multiply 3 by itself 8 times, what would I do? I'd do 3 to the exponent 8, right? If I wanted to multiply 5 by itself 11 times, I could write 5 times 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 5. Yeah, I counted. Or I could write 5 to the exponent 11. So here, if you look, what did we do? Well, we kept multiply and add, multiply and add, multiply and add, multiply and add. And we did it over and over again. So how can I show that? With an exponent. And all I need to know is how many times do I want to do this? And it's just how many years? That make sense? And the cool thing is, with a bit of practice, you'll see that you can get these answers way quicker. Let's try to get this answer without the whole table. Let's just use this equation. So the future value, we go way back to the beginning. How much money did we start with? $100. That's what we put into this equation. We start with $100. That's our principal. And then we're going to multiply that by what goes in the bracket. Well, it starts with just 1, right? And then we add our interest rate. And what was our interest rate here? 0.10. And then we close that bracket. And how many years did I do this for? 8. So try that. And if you need some help doing that on your calculator, let me know. But you can type it in exactly how we see it here. Brackets and everything. If you just write it how it's written there, it should give you exactly the answer you're looking for. I'm going to try to follow along with my little fake calculator. So we'll plug the same thing in. Look at this. Hello. So what am I going to put first? I'm going to open a bracket. You actually don't even need the first bracket, but I always put it there. It's just to force a habit for me. 100, close it. What do I do next? Open a bracket. What do I put in here? 1 plus 0.1. And then what do I do? Close the bracket. And then how do I get an exponent? What button gives me an exponent? Does anyone know? See this little arrow here? Everyone see that? That button is the exponent button on these yellow calculators, the little hat. So like this is an exponent. So I'm going to press that button. And what exponent am I putting this to? 8. By the way, some of your calculators are a little newer than this, and they actually show the 8 as an exponent. Does anyone do that? All right, mine doesn't. Mine just shows the little hat symbol. Both work, and when I press enter, what do I get? Hey, what's that number look like? The answer, but it's a lot less work, isn't it? Like, a lot less work. Does that make sense? All right. And that's how we find the future value of an investment. So I've given you a question below. If I take $7,000 and I invest it in a mutual fund that earns 7% per year for 12 years, how much is my investment worth at the end of it all? I want you to work that out. Okay, so take a minute and work on that. Oh, it is nice to be wireless, but I want to fill that screen next. This is what I have. So $7,000 to start with, 7%, 12 years. Why did I use 2 sevens? That's dumb. If I'm making this note again, I would have done 8, so they look the same digit. That's awesome. Yep. That's perfect. Yeah, very well done. Oh gosh. Did I bring my bag? What do I do? Let me see. Yep, it's going to be 1 plus that. So if you look up, right, because all you've done, yeah, you have to remind it, we also keep what we started with. So it's 1 plus that. This is still on. That's right. Yep. And I never even write a multiplication sign, even on my calculator. I always just put the bracket. Oh, you don't have to put. You don't have to put. If you put a bracket, the calculator knows to multiply. Nothing wrong with like pressing multiplication. That works. But I always don't. There's lots about these calculators I don't like, but that's something I do like about them. How about that? Yes, ma'am. What'd you get? Yeah, it's perfect. Oh, because it's money, how many decimal places will we keep? Oh, well, you know how money works. How many decimal places is money? Right? Yeah, if you think about it, you can have like 23 cents, but you can't have. Yeah, so 15,000. 765. And how many cents? That's right. Yeah, so you know what? In your defense, that is barely a comma. This font, not so great with the commas.
It would be weird if it was like $7 and then like.
Well, that's true, but still, I'm just saying. Hey, before we do anything, what did you have to do? There's a little bit of math you have to do before you get going. What little bit of math do we always have to remember to do? Yeah, totally, but you said? Yeah, this percentage. What do we want to do with that percentage? We need to remember to take it and divide it by 100. And when we do that, we get that the rate is cool. Did everyone do that? Great. Now, how'd you set your equation up?
7,000 is what you started with.
Yep.
So it's from the factory and then brackets and 1 and you have by percentage.
Yep.
So then you have to.
And what do I, so that number's there. Is that, what do I put here? Adding. Perfect. Very good. Very, very good. And when you do that, what do you get? Yeah, punch it in and see what we get. Yeah, yeah, but don't worry. Remember, how many decimal places do we keep? It's money. So how many decimal places do we keep? 2. Money is always 2. So what are the decimal places? Don't forget to round if you have to round. What decimal places am I putting there? How many cents? Okay, 34 cents. And how many? It's in the thousands, right? How many thousand? 15,000. Hey, let's talk. Let's talk about money. If you take 7 grand and you invest it, and by the way, 7% interest is pretty good, but that's lower than the average stock market return. So the average guy who's got money in the stock market does a little better than this. Yeah, a little better than this. And if you took your money and you just do nothing with it, it's more than doubled in 12 years. That's pretty good. No, again, I understand, like, okay, 12 years, 7 grand isn't a lot of money, but that's money. How much work did you do to get that? None. Nothing. Free money. It's not free money. Somebody's doing work with it, but it's money you get because when you go invest in a stock, you go and say, hey, Apple, or hey, I own stock in a company that makes upholstery for couches. So they sell stock because they need some money. So who gives them money? I give them money. But now I own part of their company. And down the road, when I go to sell it, it's worth more than it was when I started. So who's doing the work? Not me. I just went to the bank and said, hey, I want to buy some shares in this. Do it, please. And they did. The company's doing the work. And who's making the money? You are. So in 12 years, 7 grand becomes 15 grand at not a terribly high interest rate. Now, here's the scary part. Say you racked that 7 grand up in debt in like a bank account where you have a bank loan at 7%, and then you just try not to think about it. Uh-oh, in 12 years, what's happened to how much money you owe the bank? It's more than doubled, right? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Anyone have any questions about that?
Like, I know there's no way like they can start deducting money after you're done.
Yeah, I mean, if you just straight up don't pay, they're gonna come after you. I used to be a boss, and we used to like get phone calls, and it'd be like, they would call these poor people's jobs and be like, we want to deduct money from the bank account. I'd be like, yeah, no, like, or like from the paycheck. They're like, no, I mean, like you go to a judge or something, sure, but I'm not gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna just take money off Jim's paycheck and give it to you, buddy. Nope, no, thank you. But okay, so this is the power of investing. The power of investing is that over time your money grows, and remember, every year you're not starting back at 7 grand. Now you've got 7 grand plus that interest, and the year after that you have that money plus the interest, and you get to make money on all of it. It's just a little more complicated than that. Last thing, I promise. Like, and here's the deal. We're going to do, every time we cycle through, we're going to do financial stuff, but this is the last new thing. In fact, in the next cycle, I'm going to teach you how to use a computer and do it, and you don't have to do any math by hand at all. There's just one more thing, which is, remember when I gamed the system and said at the end of the year, I'm going to go back and get my interest so I can do this to make more money? What if I didn't want to wait a year? What if at the end of the week I went back and said, give me my money with my interest? Not going to be much, but then I walk back in and give it. I can make a little bit more if I get my interest every week. Does that make sense? And that's actually how it works. We don't always pay out interest just once a year. Sometimes it's once a year, and that's nice. That's the formula we just used, and it's easy math. But sometimes we have to, by the way, this should say T. I don't know why I put an N there. Whoops. Sometimes we pay out every year. By the way, does anyone know the word for when something happens every year? Annually. So if it's annually, it's just once a year. And that's easy. That means one time per year. And it means the R is just the R. If the interest rate was 5%, it stays 5%. If the interest rate was 12%, it stays 12%. And T is just T. They're just easy. Easy, easy, easy. But some things are semi-annually. My mortgage, they charge me interest on it semi-annually. This is true. So they always charge it like January 1st, July 1st. Twice a year you pay interest on your mortgage. Not once a year, twice a year. Now, I make payments every week, but they don't charge me interest every week. They charge me interest twice a year. And when something happens twice a year, we call it not annually, but semi-annually. And that means every 6 months. And how many times a year is that? 2. But keep in mind, if they're charging me interest, so say my mortgage was 10% interest. It's not, by the way. That'd be a really bad rate right now. But it has been that bad in the past. In fact, in the 80s, when my parents bought their first house, interest rates were 18%. So for every $100 they borrowed from the bank, they had to pay $18 extra at the end of each year, growing year after. Crazy interest rate. But if I have to pay interest twice a year, do I have to pay the full 10% both times? Well, that wouldn't make sense, because then how much did I actually pay in the year? 20%, right? Does that make sense? So we have to, if I'm doing this twice a year, we have to take the interest rate and we have to divide it by 2. We have to cut it in half. Yeah, I pay interest twice, but I only pay half of the interest each time. That make sense? And when I go to figure out how many times we pay, well, I'd have to take how many years, and I'd have to multiply it by 2. Because in 1 year, I pay twice. In 2 years, I'd pay 4 times. In 4 years, I'd pay 8 times, so on and so forth. Do you want me to do one more with you, or do you think you can work your way down this chart? Want to do one more? Let's do one more. Let's go down and do a different one. Let's do the tricky one. Let's do weekly. So if I play weekly, obviously I'm paying every week. How many times a year is that? Does anyone know? How many weeks in a year? What'd you say? I thought you said too many. That was funny, though a little dark. Does anyone know this is a weird number? You know it when you're an adult because like your paychecks come every other week, so you know what that looks like, and like your mortgage is due every week. There are it doesn't quite work nicely, unfortunately. But you're right. If you do 365 divided by 7, what do you get? Well, you had a calculator, for God's sake.
Oh, 52.1.
Yeah, so here's the deal. There's 52 weeks in a year and then one extra day. A year doesn't quite work perfectly. There's 52 weeks and one extra day. That's why every year the calendar shifts by one day, right? If last year January 1st was a Monday, this year January 1st will be a Tuesday, and next year it'll be a Wednesday, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Yep, shifts by one. Now, some years it shifts by 2 because every 4th year is a leap year, but we're not going to worry about that for this. Do you want me to throw the decimal in? Because believe it or not, there's not 365 days in a year. There's 365.2504 days in a year. And that's also why not only is every 4th year a leap year, but every 100th year you skip a leap year. Whoa.
That's crazy.
But then every 1,000th year, you don't skip the 100-year leap year. It's awful. It's really confusing. So
How would anyone keep track?
we're going to, well, that's important because if you don't do that, before you know it, in July it's snowing and in December it's hot. So you got to keep track, right? You got to keep them in the right place. So that's why they have to do all that. Now, if it's 52 times a year I pay, do I pay all the interest every 52 times? So obviously I have to take that interest rate and divide it by 52. And if I know how many years I do this for, what do I have to make sure I multiply that by when I put the exponent up there? Yeah, you got it, by 52. Okay, see if you can go from there. And by the way, when we say days, you do not need to put the decimal in days, all right? So just to save you time, when you do days, you can say 365. That's, I know on a leap year that's not quite right, but we're not going to worry about it for the purpose of this course. Doesn't matter. That's right. Yeah, so see if you can figure the rest of these out. No, obviously we'll take them out.
Hope so.
Don't worry, I promise. Yeah. Buy me monthly. Okay, a bicycle has how many wheels? 2. So bi-monthly means you don't pay every month, you pay every 2 months. Good. What's that called? A tricycle. Tri means 3. You can also have a unicycle, and uni means 1. I was wanting a unicycle. Really? Can you do like super or she is Yes.
Yeah, he has.
Of course he does.
He was riding it down my street. He ran into a hydro pole. I laughed.
Did you say you have one?
No, I cut this little piece of hair.
Do you have a unicycle? This is the thing I don't know about you. Do you like do mad unicycle tricks on your way home from school every day? I can see it. I can see it. My only worry with you is like, and I have the same worry with you on a bike, is that you like have your headphones in and be like looking at your phone and just like, oh, fuck.
I would.
No, don't say that. God, that's so dark.
Look at it.
You were like really all about the dark humor today.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm kidding. What? Yeah, the kid would be a new bit.
But 52 is every week. So if it's every 2 weeks, how many times is that? Good. See, you pro-star, you. Don't die. Do you have any idea how much paperwork that would be for me? I don't think there'd be like forms, and I'd probably have to go to meetings. And I'd be sad filling out the forms and meetings. Yeah, I gotta take a look.
Is it good? Kind of? Sorry, I'm putting those in the garbage.
Did you just cut your own hair in my class?
Okay, kind of.
During math class, did you cut your own hair? It looks good. That, can I say something? That's a first for me. Never had that happen in class before. I did when I managed a restaurant once have a guy trim his own beard at the restaurant table, and I asked him to leave because it creeped me out a little bit. There you go. You're good. Did you use like a camera or a mirror, or did you just?
Oh yeah, I had to use beard.
Okay, I was gonna say you didn't just like be like, yeah, that feels right.
Hey, is that? Wait, what? Every 2 weeks?
Yeah, that's good. And that's every month. And that's every 2 months.
That's like 4 something.
Yeah, 4 times a year, which would be every.
What?
If it's 4 times a year, that's what quarterly means. So if you cut the year into quarters, how big is each quarter? It's 12 months. So if you cut, okay, so if you cut it in half, that'd be how much in each half? Yes, you do. If you cut 12 in half, you know exactly. Listen, if you and I have $12 and we decide to split it evenly, how much money do you get? Good, and I get 6. Now if we decide to cut it again, so we're sharing it 4 ways. Now each of those 6s gets cut into, cut it in half again. No, half of 6 isn't 2.
Half?
Yeah, you're going to cut it in half again. 3, good. So quarterly means every 3 months.
Okay.
And that'll be 4 times a year.
I'm just saying, it doesn't look like it are.
All right, your story checks out. Yours doesn't, so get to work.
I haven't been on my phone the whole time. I fell asleep.
Oh, that's fair. Ooh, is that a hand? Yeah.
Well, when it says like 2 weeks and 2 months, is it like 3 weeks and 2 weeks and 2?
That's perfect. Yep.
Divided by 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, that's
2
perfect.
months, like 6 months.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly right.
Wait, what's
Quarterly means 4 times a year. 4 times a year. And that ends up being every 3 months.
So I'm writing 4 times.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, I've got all the easy ones here. Well, I'm glad it's easy for you. So how many times a year is that? Yeah, so that's every other month, and so that'd be 6 times a year. And so what do I have to make sure I do with the interest rate when I do that? Well, if I'm doing this 6 times a year, am I going to pay all the interest every time? That'd be way too much interest. So every time I pay it, they're going to divide the interest rate by? But I'm doing it 6 times. So they're going to divide it by? Yeah, 6. Don't make it harder than it is. Just, that's it. So that's other week. And so how many times a year is that? Has anyone done that math yet?
That's like 4 times like in the months. What?
So that's 4 times per year.
Yeah.
So that would be a 4.
Yeah, you said 3.
Well, it's every 3 months. So if you do it 4 times a year, then it'd be like January, February, March, pay. April, May, June, pay. July, August, September. That's right. Yep.
You said 4 times. Wait, what did you say?
But yeah, you're right that it's like this should be a 4.
Yeah, what did you say on the slide though?
I just said you do it every 3 months, every 3rd month. Most businesses operate in quarters. Like every 3rd month, if you own a business, you usually publish all your reports and do all of your accounting and make sure you're doing okay for that 3-month stretch. And you do it again 2nd quarter, again 3rd quarter, and you do your end of the year. All right, what about bi-weekly, every other week? How many times a year is that? Great. And what would we make sure we do with the interest rate then? Yeah, we'd just make sure we divide it by 26, right? What would we be sure we do with how many years? Well, we take how many years we're doing this for, but then we make sure we multiply it by 26. Because every year we're not collecting interest once, we're collecting interest 26 times that way. Now, this does not actually make the formula much harder. All right, the last formula, we said the future value was what? What did I do? Tell me. It's on your previous page. No, what was the formula, though? With like the letters and all that jazz. We filled it out. I drew some arrows. Remember that? We laughed, we cried. It was better than cats. What is it? Future value is equal to
I don't know.
the compound one. Remember this? Yeah, remember this guy? And then to the exponent t. Okay, look here. It's the same thing. It's the money we start with, and it's times 1 plus r. But remember, we have to divide r by whatever number it is there. Remember that? If we're doing this every week, we'd have to divide that by 52. If we did every month, we'd divide it by 12. Every day, we'd divide it by 365. And then we put it to the exponent t, but then don't forget, it has to be t times that same number. And I'm going to like highlight this yellow, highlight that yellow, and just remember that we're always dividing by this number. Now, what you'll often see put in there is they use this little symbol cy, which just stands for compounding periods per year. I don't like to think of another set of letters. I just think like, oh, I'm always dividing the interest rate by how many times a year. I'm always multiplying how many years by that. I don't even like the cy bit. I wouldn't even put it in. To me, it's just a box where we're always going to put the appropriate number there. That make sense? Cool. So let's try one of these together, and I'll send you off on your way. So if you remember last time around, I invested $7,000, and I was making 7% per year for 12 years, right? Now Cleves found a better deal. Friggin' Cleves. How much money is Cleves getting? 8.5. What'd you say?
Oh, my friend, Mr. Cleave used to go to his school, and he called him Mr. Cleavage.
That's very punny. That's because his name is Cleve, and cleavage starts with cleave. It makes sense, really. I like about Orlando. Really, all the puns are pretty lame. Which is to say, grade 9s have a habit of calling me Mr. Florida, which I respond to by being very unpleasant and saying, that's not funny, kid. And then the other one is Mr. Orlando Bloom, which, hey, I'll take. That's a compliment, right? So anyway, okay, here we go. Before we can do any math, what should we do with this interest rate? What do we always do with interest rates? Turn it into a decimal, which we do by? Yes, just go ahead and do that before we do anything else. It's always a good place to start. What do we get when we do that? What do we get? 0. Be careful. Do it again.
0.05.
Very good. No problem. Now I'm going to say R equals, so we know what we're talking about. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to use this formula. By the way, do I expect you to memorize this formula? No, I'm going to give it to you, all right? But I want you to know how to use it. So we're going to say the future value is, well, let's go. P is what we start with, right? You don't need to rewrite this because you already have it on the previous page. I'm just putting it here. How much money do we start with? Or not me. How much money does Cleve start with? All right, so he starts with $7,000. And then what do we multiply that by? Well, we open a bracket. And what's the first thing we multiply it by? 1. Because the 1 tells us that we get to keep what we start with. If you didn't do that, if you ever forget to put the 1 in there, you're going to get a really, really small answer. Because every time you collect interest, you're only going to get the interest, and they keep the money you started with. That's not a good deal. All right, if your bank tries to say that, hey, we'll give you 3% interest, but we keep all the money you give us to start with, that would suck. Don't do that. So that 1's important. The 1 means we keep our money, and then we add to it what? Okay, so the interest rate divided by something. And we have to figure out what we divide it by. And in this question, what am I going to divide it by? We're always dividing it by something. No, I think you're good. We are doing this monthly. And monthly means how many times a year? 12 times a year. That's right. So we are going to take this number and divide it by 12. Yeah, and it's not, I wish I hadn't made this question 12. In fact, can we do something together? Let's change this. Let's make it 13 years so we know where the numbers come from. All right, that was a bad design decision on my part, so let's just fix it. Let's say we're not talking about 12 years. We're talking about 13 years. That way we'll really know the difference between those two numbers. Is that fair? Okay, so we do that, and now what exponent do we put this to? 13 years, but what do I have to remember to do with the years? I also have to multiply it by 12. And we're actually going to have to use a bracket in our exponents. And that's new. When you go to do this on your calculator, after the exponent button, you're going to have to open a bracket and then close the bracket at the end. I wouldn't. I would put it into the calculator exactly like this. In fact, I'm going to put it into the calculator with you right now. So let's look at how we would put this into our calculators to make sure we get the answer we're looking for. Oh, I hate you. Come on. Okay, so how do I plug this in? What do I start with? Yeah, and I always put them in brackets. It's a force of habit. That first bracket actually doesn't matter, but I just always do it so I don't screw up. What do I do then? I open another bracket. And the calculator knows that those two brackets are being multiplied. I don't have to tell it. What do I put in that bracket? 1 plus. And then what am I doing here? Dividing it by what? 12. And see how up in the screen, it already has made it a fraction for me. I don't have to worry. It knows that. And then what do I do after I do that? Close the bracket. Then what do I do? Exponent. And then what do I do in the exponent? Open a bracket. And then I put in. Good. And then I close the bracket. And there it is. With a bit of practice, you'll plug these in like nothing. They're not so bad. So after 13 years, how much money does Cleves have? Did we all get the same number?
Yep.
$21.52 and 41 cents. Whoa, that's a highlighter. So 21,052 and how much? 40. What was it? Well, why? Yeah, why? What's after that zero? Yeah, I rounded, just like you were going to round. Okay. And again, this 8.5%, just to be clear, the average stock this year, last year, went up 30%. Now, that's not typical. That's not typical at all. But the point being, 8% in an investment is very doable, not an out of sight. If you have a good balanced portfolio with a bit of money in it, there's no reason you can't earn 8% some years, 8.5%. No reason you can't have years where you make 10 or 20%. You'll have some years where you make 3 or 4%. You might have some years where you lose money. But look at this. If you average 8.5%, look what $7,000 becomes in just 13 years. A lot of money. And it's just going to keep growing. That's how compound interest works. So tomorrow, we will pick up with the questions that remain here, and then I will step back, and we're just going to do some project-y stuff, all right? If you are absent in the next couple days, log into Teams on your phone or on a website or whatever, because what we're working on will be posted there. You're here tomorrow, right? Great. Oh, and I have got your first assignments for you. Can I remind you of something else? If I don't return something the next day, I've just forgotten it existed.
Yep.
In fact, the only reason I'm returning this now is because I literally tripped over it in the room next door. I have a habit of forgetting that things exist. So just remind me if I don't give you something back. Or in your case, get me this. Because you know what you have out right now? There's 0 on it right now. Which is not a good mark, and you have a lot of good work on this. Don't give it to me. Okay? Okay, and there's still 100. There you go, son. Oh. Here you go, Samantha. If you were away, who will get this done? Okay? Hey, first of all, lovely. Second one, he's great. And then at some point, you'll stop dancing lessons. That's a shame. You would have been even better. But that's still a good mark. Good. Was that passive aggressive? Was that just straight up aggressive? I didn't mean to. It is. It was lovely. They did a really nice job. Oh, that's you know what? There you go. You had like a couple of silly mistakes you made a bunch of times, but there was simple stuff. Also, I see how it is. That's fine.
I was doing that one last.
Well, if you want to do it, you can get the marks. You show it to me. There you go.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Wow.
Well done. Yeah, you did great. Very well done.
There's 4 marks out. That's okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was happy with that. I hope you are too.